Hey, folks, welcome to the sixth episode of the Knock and Talk show. Host here, Patrick Faulkner. Today we have Richard Kaufman, a professional podcaster and former Army screw up turned Soldier of the Year. Want to know more? Stay tuned. We'll be right back. I love this song. All right, folks, welcome to the sixth episode of the Knock and Talk show. I'm your host, Patrick Faulkner, and today we have an outstanding guest here with us, Richard Kaufman. He is a U.S. Army veteran and most recently known as the comeback coach. And brother, I'm so honored to have you here on the show. I can't wait to get this thing started. So why don't you jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself and we get started.
Guys, my name is Richard Kaufman, also known as the comeback coach. And I'm so honored to call you a friend. And your episode on my show was truly amazing and life-changing, and I can't wait to put it out. But guys, just to get it started, I'm the guy that if you were ever in the military or if you're ever a police officer, I was the guy that when you were going through your training, I was the shit bag that always got in trouble. I was the guy that always had the long hair. So I was the guy that made everybody do push-ups. So that was me. I joined the military in '86, and I know we're going to go back, but this is just a quick down and dirty.
Yeah.
I joined the military at 17, became a full-blown drug addict and alcoholic in the military. They threw my ass out, got back in again 2 years later, was about to be thrown out for a second time until the morning of 9/11. And that totally changed the whole trajectory of my life.
Wow.
And got back in. From being thrown out and being almost thrown out a second time, I became Soldier of the Year. I became a non-commissioned officer. A lot of great things in my military career. And then I moved to New Jersey, and my first drill with my new unit, I was backing up a young private, and instead of him hitting the brakes, hit the gas, ran over my whole head, ran over my body with an up armor Humvee, which caused me to lose my vision.
Wow.
And so, long story short, can't see, can't shoot, military doesn't need you, see you, and they medically discharged me. And that was Memorial Day 2012. Attempted suicide that day. Thank God it didn't go through.
Yeah, thank God.
And then I started wrote a book, started a podcast, all courtesy of Gary Vaynerchuk. Thank you, Gary. Love you, brother. And I just started interviewing people that had it worse than me. And then the podcast just blew up. And now, during this whole time, I was with General Nutrition Center for over 30 years. And I worked with players from NFL, and Major League Baseball, WWE. I worked with Lennox Lewis when he was the heavyweight champion of the world. So I was always in the fitness industry, always helping coach people. And that's where the whole comeback coach came. Gary Vaynerchuk came up with that while we were having lunch one day. And that's where the whole comeback coach thing started, because I was always helping people that are trying to come back either from injuries or from PTSD, traumatic brain injuries and stuff like that. So that's how it all got started. And now it just blew up into this thing. And now I'm just having fun taking care of people and helping people that are struggling in life, but also in business. Because a lot of people, with COVID and everything, struggled and have had to reimagine their businesses. So now I interview 7, 8, 9-figure earners, get their opinions on how those veterans and first responders that own businesses can help reimagine their businesses. So that's it. All right, guys, we got to go.
There we go. It was a nutshell.
Yeah,
This is Richard in a nutshell.
that's it.
That what a story. Just 4 minutes in, and I'm hooked. I've got to know more. So you mentioned 1986 was when you originally signed the papers, stood there at MEPS, raised your hand, and said, "Yes, I will. I swear." What was the leading factor in making that decision back in the mid '80s?
Well, let me digress a little bit. I grew up very poor. My father left when we were 3 months old. My mother was an active addict. So we moved around a lot. So I never made a lot of friends. And on New Year's Eve has had New Year's Eve has a big profound day in my life. But on New Year's Eve, when I was 12 years old, I had my first taste of alcohol. And by the age of 13, I was a full-blown alcoholic. Wow. So I quit high school. And for me, it was, I was looking around and I'm like, all right, I'm 16 years old, about to turn 17. It's either military or jail. And unfortunately, I did both at the same time. And, but it was I had nothing going for me. It was just, and, a lot of people were thinking, were you thinking about making it a career? And I'm like, no, I just want to go get paid to go party. That was my goal. And, I never planned to live past the age of 25. So it was just like, all right, let's go travel the world, party, and see what happens. So it wasn't a whole patriotic, I really didn't care. It was just something to do,
Right. And that's I've heard that story, similar story, where it was either the military or a life of crime, going to prison, going to jail if they didn't straighten up. And I also heard the stories of those veterans that joined because they heard there were great parties on base, and you get booze cheap on base.
And 17 years old, so now I'm going with. All right, but first, because I know we got to have some fun while we're talking.
Yes.
I'm a big professional wrestling fan. Always have been, always will be. So my big guy, I loved Ric Flair. So I had long hair. My hair was like down to here. I had the smart idea to dye my hair platinum the night before I go to basic training. About 4 a.m. I wake up and I'm like, holy shit, I'm in trouble. This is not going to end good. So I tried dyeing it back to brown and it became like orange.
Oh.
I get to basic training and they're clamoring. They're fighting who's going to cut my hair. And, and then they dogged me out for the whole basic training. So, there I am. I only weighed 140 pounds back then. I think my left leg weighs 140 pounds now. But I get there and they can't wait to cut they're arguing. You're actually arguing.
That's
who's going to cut my hair. And, and of course, me having a wise mouth from Jersey, that didn't help me at all. So I think Fort Knox is about 5 inches deeper than it should have been from all the push-ups that I did.
Yeah, my son actually left earlier this week for basic training, and he had some curls, some locks that he was holding on to for as long as he could. And I remember when I went to basic, we had guys that showed up with already shaved heads, and that didn't prevent them from getting another haircut. Like they still got their head shaved.
Yeah.
They just went a little closer. I think they took the first layer of skin just so they could say they got something off that head.
Yep.
All right. So you joined it at 17. Did you have to have your mom's permission? Did she have to sign the waiver?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I mean, I write about it in my book. My mother was an active addiction at this time. So me and her, the night before we went to, before they dropped me off she dropped me off at MEPS. We downed a bottle of Southern Comfort together.
Well,
So
oh,
yeah, and the
okay.
thing is, she always wanted to join the military, but back, back, I'm not going to tell anybody how old my mother is, 75. They
Shame on you.
they told her, you can't, they wanted her to join the military because she was a nurse, but her parents told her, only whores join the military. So she missed out on joining the military,
Mm,
and I guess that was she was trying to live vicariously through me.
okay. All right. So, you brought up something interesting that's not in my show notes here. Um, it was WWF at the time, right? Before they got told to change by the World Wildlife Federation.
Yep,
Um, Ric Flair was actually was it TNT
he
and
was
not
in he was in the NWA to start out
okay.
out of Charlotte, North Carolina.
All right. So, I grew up watching on Sundays after church, WWF, and I couldn't wait. Sorry, mom, but I couldn't wait to get home from church, and mom always stood in the aisles of church talking to everybody. And me, my brother, and my dad were standing at the door waiting on mom to finish her social rounds so that we could all leave and go home and change and get ready for lunch. And I remember rushing upstairs to my room, change after I turned USA on to watch WWF. And at the time, my favorite was Ricky the Dragboat Dragon. Wait,
Steamboat. Yeah,
Steamboat. Yes,
Rick Steamboat. Yeah,
yeah, he
what a
was.
great story because about the guys from the WWE, or WWF back then. I was working at Caesar's Palace in Pennsylvania, and they used to wrestle up at a place called Foxwoods, and they all stayed at Caesar's. So I'm a waiter. I'm a 20-something-year-old kid, and I see the Undertaker come walking in for breakfast, and then I see Triple H come in for breakfast, and I see Tatanka come in for breakfast, and of course I get their table, so I'm like, yeah, I love this, I get to sit, and it was just them, and they had their own room, so I'm trying to talk to them, and I'm like, Mr. Undertaker, or Mr. Triple H, and Chris Chavez, his name is Tatanka. He said, I said, Mr. Tatanka, and then Undertaker goes, stop calling me Undertaker. My name is Mark, and Triple H goes, just call me Paul. That's my real name, and then uh, Tatanka goes, just call me Tatanka. And Undertaker and Paul just both looked at me, go, what an asshole. Nobody liked him anyway. And then I got to hang out with them they were up there for like a whole week. And, it was great just to be able to sit down and bullshit and talk about, Triple H, talking about his coming up, and, talking about, Undertaker, which actually now became a born again Christian. So thank you. Love you, Mark. And if you guys ever want to know his name is Mark Callis, Callous.
Okay.
And Triple H's real name is Paul Levesque. So if you guys ever want to look up on LinkedIn, those are the real people instead of just their monikers. So I just wanted an interesting story to, I love telling people that they say never meet your heroes, but I met some of mine, and they were the salt of the earth.
And it's always great, when you meet somebody like that, a hero or somebody that you're holding at, a higher level of appreciation, and they're good people and not the jackass that, that you hear about some celebrities. Um, One of, I guess, Keanu Reeves, from what I understand, is the salt of the earth as well.
Yeah.
Lives very basic means, is nice to people, is if they recognize him or meet him on the street, in the subway, whatever. So I think that's cool that your heroes treated you that way. At a time when you were looking up to him. I
And
think,
like, at the same time, I was working there. Lennox Lewis was fighting in Atlantic City for a couple fights, so he actually stayed at Caesars for like months, and I got to be his personal whatever he needed. If he needed anything, I got it for him. And the second time I actually got to run his whole training camp and get to hang out with him and Emmanuel Stewart. And me and Lennox used to shoot pool every night after training.
how
And the fun
cool is that?
Lennox was, he comes from Great Britain. He's a true gentleman, and his mother cooks. His mother back then cooked every meal for him, and
Wow.
his mother traveled wherever he went.
That's
So it
awesome.
was nice to be able to, hang out with the world champion, and then just be able to shoot pool with him, and just be able to hang out and talk. And then, there's his mother come in, bringing him lunch or dinner. It was kind of like a surreal moment when you realize, being a good person, doesn't matter if you're a world champion, doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're a good person, good things happen.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I mean, at that age, being able to shoot pool on a Friday night with the champ, who gets to do that? That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was fun, and it's fun, that I get to. And the funny thing is, like, I never thought about, oh, should I get an autograph? Should I get a picture? I never thought of it. I was just like, it's Lennox.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
Yes, I guess especially since he had residency there for like a month. I mean, it was just a Thursday afternoon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, let's fast forward. You were a tank guy.
Yeah, I was. We're called DATs, which stands for dumbass tankers, and and I got in trouble a lot.
Yeah.
In garrison, which means when we were, we weren't in the field. When we're hanging out with all the commanders and everything. That was not me. I got bored very quickly because of my severe ADHD, and I got in trouble a lot. I mean, I got 6 Article 15s and 2 field grade Article 15s before they threw me out.
You
But
were
I think,
busy.
yeah, I was a wild child. I mean, seriously, I was a wild guy. But the thing that saved my bacon a lot was once we got out in the field, I was the ultimate soldier. You want me to stay up 72 hours? Good. Give me some rippets. We'll rock and roll for 72 hours straight. I'm good. Whatever you need me to do. If you want me to pull guard duty, I'll do guard duty all night long. It doesn't bother me. But when we got in the rear with the gear, that's when I would totally just screw up everything. So I think just being that ultimate field soldier saved my ass long enough until the final straw, and then they had to get rid of me.
Mm. Well, you brought up Rippets, so let's do the first. Here we go. First plug for the sponsor. You were at GNC, right? So you're familiar with Raise Energy and Rep Sports.
I like the watermelon flavor. That's my favorite.
Okay, I haven't had watermelon yet.
Yeah.
This is Voodoo. This one is one of my favorites. So if you go over to repsports.com and use coupon code Pat Raise or Pat Raz, I think Pat Raz sounds better, but Pat Raise, you get 15%. So here's to Rep Sports.
I'll drink to that.
There we go. All right. So, Mr. Dat, what is life like inside a tank? I mean, I was an Air Force guy, and my playground was the flight line, and inside and outside and on top and underneath of the F-16. So my world was sort of wide open unless we had to get in the cockpit to do some avionic stuff in there. But what is life like being contained inside? What I can only imagine is a Volkswagen level comfort zone.
Now,
An
are
old
we
Beetle
talking?
Volkswagen.
Are we talking before we all eat chili mac? Or
Up to and including
what?
the chili mac.
It's very compact, like you said. It's very compact. The company commander is sitting where I am, and tank commander is sitting where I'm at. My gunner is right below me, and my loader is not even 12 inches away from me, and the driver's in the front hatch. So it's very compact. It's very very loud, very noisy. It's very hectic because you have your 110 millimeter main gun. Then my main weapon was a 50 caliber, and my loader's main weapon is a 240 caliber. So sometimes it's all going off at the same time, and it's very chaotic.
Wow.
But it when you're that close, I always say, some of my best times were sitting in the middle of the desert at 3 a.m. in the morning on top of the turret, just sitting there talking to each other about home and about relationships and about their kids, because you become a real bond. Like, I interviewed a gentleman yesterday. He's a Navy SEAL commander, and he was talking about how the teams are, how they become closer than brothers, that when they go on missions, you just know the person by the silhouette. They don't even have to say anything. And I think that's where me and my guys, we became that a bond. Now, of course, there's a lot of shenanigans going on.
I can only imagine.
One time, back then, we used to be able to get a satellite phone.
Mm-hmm.
So me being the wise ass, I'm like, all right, it's like 4:00 in the afternoon. It's going to get dark. I'm hungry. I'm like, all right, I'm going to order a pizza, and we're out in the field. So we called Domino's and gave them like an 8-digit grid, and they actually showed up with our pizza with an 8-digit grid. It was,
wow.
Everybody was in shock. It was totally epic.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, stuff like that. I mean, we used to do a lot of crazy stuff because, 6:00 it would get dark and a lot of people would stop training. So we had to find stuff to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we would go out on missions. We would, find people that are on sleeping bags and put peanut butter on them so they get eaten by the animal.
By the ants. Oh.
Yep. So,
Wow.
we used to, when we were out in the desert, we used to get bored and we would just get scorpions and put them in our helmets and watch them fight to the death.
Yeah.
But it was just fun stuff. It was great. It was, just like my cousin Pat, he likes to go shoot 9mm. And I'm like, listen, bro, my main weapon was a 50 cal and a 110 millimeter. Shooting a 9mm is like no fun whatsoever, But it was a great time, man. And it was, but now, unfortunately, like I said, if we all eat chili mac, thank God for gas masks, because we were putting the gas masks on and it wasn't even gas.
Oh gosh. I can only imagine. In a small comparison, one of my field training officers when I was just out of the police academy was a bodybuilder, and
protein farts.
Yes. So one of the first trips that we'd make after roll call was to Einstein Bagels, so that he could load up on peanut butter, whatever, and then he would have his protein shake to wash down the peanut butter, and he wouldn't. There was no like warning. There was no gas. There was no incoming. Nothing. All of a sudden, you're just gasping for air, like anything fresh air. And he would be in the driver's seat, and he would put the child lock, window lock on. So there's the polyester shirt didn't have any ply into it whatsoever. And it was summertime, so I didn't even have long sleeves. I was like trying to do the vampire, just to try to have some sort of filtration. It was awful. So I can only, and that was just one dude. I can't imagine a confined tank area with.
So maybe they knew something about wearing masks all this time.
What's that?
Maybe they knew something about wearing masks all this time.
Maybe they did. Maybe they did. Because we didn't have we didn't have that option in a patrol car.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun in being a tanker. I had so much fun, and here I am, a 21-year-old kid, and I'm in charge of a $100 million vehicle, and they don't realize what a blazing drunk and alcoholic I am. So you give me a vehicle to play with, So it was fun. I loved it. I did over 23 years. Changed my MOS a few times also. So
yeah. So from being inside a tank, tell me about your days as a cavalry scout.
Well, they always say now this is the second time. This is when I got back in.
Okay.
I got thrown out the first time, and when I got back in, and after the morning of 9/11, it changed everything in my life. I became the ultimate soldier. My goal was to be the ultimate soldier. So if they ask me, you want to go to class? Sure. You want to go to school? Sure. Whatever you want me to do. You want me to go to class? You want me to go to school? You want me to give the P test, be a pecker checker? Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. So I did that. And, then they said, listen, when a tank breaks down, next best thing is a Humvee. You want to learn to be a Cav Scout? I'm like, sure. Why not? So it was pretty cool to learn how get into doing more deep into detail about land nav, stuff like that, calling in fire. So it was a great to be able to check out different lines of work, because sometimes we, even in business or in life, we know our own little niche. But sometimes when I got hurt, when I did get hurt for 2 weeks, they kept me at the TOC, which means you get to see everything that's going on. So I got to hang out with the battalion camp commander, brigade commander. And then I finally started to realize, wow, there's such a bigger picture than just me and my tank platoon. So it was great to be able to go to school and learn about, start looking at the bigger picture of a battle than just my tank and my wingman.
Well, you've mentioned 9/11 a couple of times now as sort of being a turning point. What did that day specifically do to and for you in your military career? Why was that such a light switch for you to hunker down and turn around?
Well, where I'm sitting, if I go out on my front porch, I can actually overlook where the Twin Towers once stood.
No kidding.
And this is where I grew up. So we knew people that were in the towers that day. We knew people that didn't come home. And I was in the South Carolina National Guard. Now, picture this. I'm about to be thrown out for the second time. Now, I wasn't drinking. I wasn't drugging. I was just an asshole. And they were going to throw me out for the second time. So all my gear is to the right of the TV. So as I'm watching them pulling bodies out of the Pentagon, and as I'm watching them, the towers falling, knowing people that are in there, here I came to realization, I've been taking everything in my life for granted. There's guys and girls that went to the Pentagon that day to serve their country, came out in body bag or didn't come out at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I'm seeing, because back then when we were watching it, there was no editing. It was just live.
Right.
And you can actually see the bodies hitting the concrete. And that's when I came to realization, I think the Lord said, that he'll humble you. And I actually broke down into my couch. I mean, literally broke down into my couch, crumbled into it, cried out. I said, Lord, I know you've given me so many chances. Just give me another chance to be able to help people that can't help themselves. And like I said, I called my company commander. I called my first sergeant. I said, listen, you've heard all my bullshit before. I said, but this time I'm serious. I want to come in and talk to you guys. And, they seen something different in me. And the funny thing is, I'm still friends with my company commander, and they kept me, so, and within 3 years, I became Soldier of the Year, non-commissioned officer, and finished with 23 years. But what it was I seen that day that I took so much for granted. And I was that guy that was always taking.
Mhm.
And now it turned around to where I wanted to be that guy that wanted to give, and pay it forward. So that's when it really changed my life. And what really changed was I got to drill that morning. Now here I am. I just got busted E4 to E1 again for like the eighth. So
Wow.
and like eighth time already.
Goodness.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and then I'm like, all right, they say, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Right.
So I started to just sit back and I watched, and I got there 2 hours early, and I watched all the successful people get there like an hour and a half early. And I watched what they did all day. And then I stayed until they all went home, and I seen what they did. So that's when I decided, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be hanging out with the E1s, E4s. If they're not E6 or higher, I'm not going to hang out with them because I can't really learn anything from them. So that's what I did. I just started sticking with the winners, and now I do the same thing in business and podcasting too.
Well, that's a very interesting look at yourself. To be able, in a time of national tragedy, a turning point for the country, for a lot of lives, and I was already out of the military. Well, Air Force. I think you called it the Chair Force. Like,
I think it's still military. I think.
you think? Okay, all right.
So.
We'll work with that for right now. But I was already.
The best chow halls, by the way.
Yes.
Are amazing.
Yeah, and our 4-star hotels in the desert were a whole lot better than some of the other branches.
Now, did you get a Purple Heart from a paper cut or anything yet?
No,
Okay.
I didn't. I didn't get very many paper cuts. I wasn't a paper pusher. I was what you call an SP or a sortie producer. I actually worked. I turned wrenches. I didn't get the 9 to 5 office job where you got an hour for lunch and an hour for school. I picked the wrong job when I went. I should have picked a different one, but on 9/11, I was already out. I was already policing, and was about 2 years into my policing career when that happened. So, that changed law enforcement a lot, and I saw a lot of officers who were probably wearing similar shoes, not exactly the same shoes you were, but they were troublemakers. They always like to live sort of on the fringe. They got into law enforcement because it was just a natural progression from the military, and they were probably troublemakers in the military. But they sort of turned around as well and became serious and started taking the job more serious. So I think that's interesting that it was literally like a light switch for you to go from the troublemaker to the track to becoming the Soldier of the Year. I mean, that's
really, because once you break people's trust, it takes a long time.
Yes.
To build it. Now, so not only am I in the deep South, I'm a Yankee with a bad attitude. So I had to reestablish relationships, and it took 10 years, finally somebody said, all right, you're a damn Yankee. But my role, I finally figured out my role was that I was the motivator, where I would get up in the morning because I was so happy to be alive. I'd stand on the front slope of my tank and just start singing music while everybody's eating chow.
Okay.
So they knew that, all right, if Kaufman's having a good day, we're going to have a good day. But they knew if I was down and defeated, it was going to be a bad day. And I think that's one thing people really loved about me is I was always upbeat, always motivated. It's like, okay, today's going to be a shit show, but let's make the best out of the shit show. So, while everybody else is complaining about cleaning weapons, I'm singing there, I'm having fun. I'm ordering pizzas, I'm ordering Domino's, Taco Bell. I'm just having fun with whatever we got to do, because the worst case scenario, we're going home. Eventually, we're going home.
Right.
So I started living my life and getting the most out of every minute and being present in whatever I do.
Yeah, that's good advice for anybody in any situation they're in, any current situation they're in life. Make the lemonade, as they say, out of the lemons you're given. If life right now is a soup sandwich, well, add some cheese to the sandwich. Make it a little bit better.
Why not? I mean, there's so much bad stuff. That's why I stopped watching the news. I don't listen to any negative stuff. But sometimes you just have to addition by subtraction, and you might have to cut some people out of your life. You might have to cut some, TV stuff that you watch that has negative stuff. But sometimes it's addition by subtraction.
I like that, addition by subtraction. I think I've heard that once before, but never really, thought of it in context. But that's also some good stuff. Man, you're a wealth of knowledge. Did you know that?
No, I'm just old.
Oh goodness. So from Cav Scout, you were also just a knuckle dragger, right? An infantryman, a bullet magnet.
I went to school to be a tanker, and then they offered me to go to 11 Bravo school, and I'm like, all right. So I did that, and then they wanted to go to Cav Scout, and I was like, all right, I did that. And then they said, you want to go to be a combat medic? I was like, all right, I did that, because I figured, all right, so if the tank breaks down, you hop over to Humvee, the Humvee breaks down, you're going to be walking anyway. So you might as well learn how to walk the right way. Yeah. And it's funny now, like I've been out now. It's my daughter's going to be 9. Yeah, I'm out about almost 9 years. And like for me, when I was in the platoon, I was always the guy that had everybody's 6. So I was at the back of the squad. So even when I'm walking with my family, I always fall behind for some reason, and I'm always watching out. So when I tell people I got your 6, it's just because that's something that I've always done. And that's something what I got used to doing. I got used to making sure that, like I got to tell you a funny story eventually, but I almost went to jail in the military for another time, but this was for something good.
For something good. Sure.
Good.
Okay.
We're in Germany. It's fucking cold. It's snowing. My tank broke down, so we're having to change track. And this time I'm a non-commissioned officer. Now, in the non-commissioned officers, we have something called the NCO Creed, which means you take care of your guys or girls. They come first. You eat last. You eat. Whatever happens, your guys go first. If I got to go without eating, fine. Now I can use it now as I'm old. But I always let my people eat. So my guys get up online, and here comes this captain, just walks by and steps in line. Now, we've been breaking tracks since this morning. We're all hungry, angry, tired. And I just looked at him. I said, "What the fuck are you doing?" He's like, "Excuse me?" I'm like, you don't eat in front of your guys. I'm like, that's bullshit. And then he cursed me out. So I popped him in his mouth, and I dropped him in the snow. And of course, I'm like, oh my God. I'm going to, I don't like Kansas, but I think I'm going to
Kansas.
But they pull me off of them, and I get pulled over to. And now the whole thing is the brigade sergeant major seen it all, and he took me into his office or tent back then. He's like, you could be going to jail. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm like, but this is my first rodeo, so that's why I said, I never sell rank on, because we never know how long I'm going to keep it. So he says, but
Velcro, right? It was just
it's Velcro, thank God. So he goes, you know what? I should bust you. He said, but I was in Vietnam, and that's what a leader would have done in Vietnam. And you always put your guys first, and I see you always putting your guys first. He said, "Give me your hand." And I put my hand out. He slapped it and says, "Don't do that again."
Nice.
So, yeah. So, sometimes you have to, uh, you look out for your guys. And that's something that I've always taken seriously. I've always, figured, hey, you know what? I'm going to take care of my guys. I'm going to make sure that my guys are taken care of. They're well fed. And I let them know that they're cared and they're loved and they're loved. And I love on them. And I was probably one of the only NCOs that would hug on their guys just to let them know that they're cared and they're loved about. So that's something I always prided myself on was, being an NCO that actually cared about his people.
Well, you're nothing without them, right?
Yeah.
Without the troops.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made it up to E4. I just did 4 years in the Air Force before I just did the one enlistment. When I got into law enforcement, I had a fantastic my first patrol sergeant was an amazing leader and one that I emulated when I finally became a patrol sergeant because of his leadership style. And he was always there if you needed him. He was never around if you didn't need him. So he wasn't a micromanager, but he always afforded you the opportunity to call upon him if you needed it. And of course, he was a patrol sergeant, so he had a wealth of knowledge and helped on a scene or figure stuff out, things like that. And so he would always say, whenever I was in the precinct roll call room and he was talking to the lieutenant would say, "Hey, Rich, thanks for doing that." And my sergeant Rich would say, "Well, LT, my job's to make you look good. So it was my job." And I thought that was a great way of looking at it, in that, yeah, you're a supervisor and you're there to take care of your troops, but you're also there to make sure that those that are above you look good for the stuff that you're doing. And by taking care of your troops, you're going to make the lieutenant look good, because the troops are going to be happy. The troops are going to do what they're supposed to be doing. And so, as a supervisor or leader, you're supposed to. I saw something yesterday. I think it was yesterday, but it was a meme. But it said, leaders don't need a title, and you don't need a title to be one.
Yeah.
Something to that effect, So,
But now my guys, unfortunately, like when I moved to New Jersey, it took them 6 months to do my paperwork. So I would actually have to drive back to South Carolina to make drills.
okay.
I'd get off on a Friday. It'd be a 13-hour drive. I'd do my drill and I'd come back and another 13 hours. So my guys would be like, "Sarge, I can't make it today." I was like, "Bro, I just drove 13 hours. You're 7 minutes from here. I don't want to hear any of your shit."
Right. Yes.
And he's like, "Yeah, I guess you're right." But, I always had that relationship where, I would tell my guys, and, as soon as a new guy would come to my squad, I would tell him, "Listen, I was a screw up, but you're allowed one fuck up. One.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it again. And don't lie to me."
Right.
If you're drunk, if you say, "I can't come, I'm drunk," then that's your one, and I'll cover for you. But make sure you don't lie to me. And it worked out really well. And the one thing, when I got out, obviously, they medically discharged me, but it was starting to become a new army, and I didn't like it, because back when I came in through, I'm like one of the OGs. I went back in '86, where if me and you had a problem, we would take off our jackets, go behind the tank, beat the shit out of each other, go upstairs, have a beer, talk about it, and that's it.
And it was done.
Started talking about, "Oh, maybe you should write a counseling statement," and you're like, "No, just." And I didn't like it, where it was just, there was no communications between leaders and their guys. It was just, paperwork, and that was one reason I think I'm glad I got out, because a lot of it is, like when we went through basic, we ran for when we did our PT test, we did it in boots, and then all of a sudden they go to sneakers, and now you don't even have to shine your boots anymore. It's like you sleep in your uniform and you could look like a shitbag. And I was a professional shitbag. I would have done great. I would have been like super soldier.
Yeah.
I had military creases everywhere.
Everywhere. Yes. Yeah. We call them wrinkle grenades in your laundry basket,
Yeah.
When I went through basic, we got fancy like sweatpants and a fancy sweatshirt and Saucony running shoes, and we were comfortable when we had to run. It was, I went through in February, and it was only 6 weeks long, so I was done by the first part of April, and they gave us some nice shorts and T-shirt to run in when it got a little warmer outside. I can't imagine running in boots. That must have sucked.
It did, but that's why, like, I have a nephew. He's thinking about becoming a pilot. I was like, join it. Anybody ask me where should I join? Join the Air Force. I'm like, just join the Air Force. I love the way that they operate. There's certain people that I'm friends with, Dr. Robert Garcia, the warrior strategist, and some of the stuff he talks about the Air Force. But one thing that bothers me, Pete, is when you said I only did 4 years. And that bothers me because you raised your right hand. You were ready to go. So don't ever think that you only did serve 4 years. Well, some people never do that, and only 2% of the population ever raised their right hand.
True, that's true. And I did 4 years active. I did another year in active reserve. I switched from avionics to law enforcement while I was trying to get a job as a police officer in the civilian world. And I appreciate that. Thanks for turning that statement back around on me. I appreciate that. I joke around with my brothers and sisters from the other branches that all make fun of the Air Force, and it's all sibling rivalry, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're all part of the same team with different missions, different
just
goals.
Like we can all go into a bar and we'll be cracking on each other, but if a civilian picks a fight with an airman, we're all gonna jump in there because we all got each other's backs.
Yep.
That's one great thing about the thin green line, which I call it. Because that me and you, we may not know each other, but if, say, like I went to the VA the other day, if you sit down next to me at the VA, all of a sudden there's a bond.
Right.
And we could just start talking about deep shit. And, we go home and we can't even talk to our wives or our families about the shit that we went through. But even just meeting each other for 5 minutes, we can go deep because we all know, all right, we've all been there. We've all done that. And we all got the T-shirt. So I think that's one thing I love about the military and the police department is there's the thin blue line and then there's the thin green line too.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I meet, veterans all the time from different branches, and there is that instant connection. Even though, I was not a combat veteran, I was, hundreds of miles away from anything that could be considered, action. And, I did have nicer accommodations when we did deploy than the Marines or the Army and sometimes the Navy. But there's still, as you put it, there's still that bond from raising the hand and knowing I may not have been front lines or seen combat or lost a brother or a sister next to me in a battle, but I know that you probably did, and I would be here. Not you.
Okay. Now, the only war that I ever went through was the war in my brain. And I was married 3 times. So does that count?
It does.
Okay, then
Yes.
I'm a combat vet.
Yes. There is a tremendous amount of PTSD that's involved in that. Not, yeah. Yeah. But I agree with you. There is that very common bond, unspoken bond. Doesn't matter what branch you serve, even the coasties, right? Because that's the one branch we can make fun of.
But you know what? Like, I'm a big Deadliest Catch guy. I love
Okay,
watching the show. And those guys are badasses.
they
Those
are.
guardsmen are badasses. So I
Yes,
give them all props, for what they do, man. I couldn't do it.
I always said that if I were to do it again, I would try to go into the Coast Guard because of the 3 Bs. From a single man at the time, I was single. The 3 Bs were babes, beaches, and bikinis. And just about anywhere that the Coast Guard has got a base or station, I'm not sure what they call them, but wherever they're stationed, there's a beach. I mean, even Alaska's got a day of 70 degrees where you can go out to the beach. So, and I probably would have tried to do it that way if I were to do it again as a young single man joining the military.
It reminds me of what something an old man told me. He said, "Son," he said, "if you want to go broke, stay away from the 2 T's." I'm like, 2 T's? What is that?
Oh,
And
boy.
he's like, "Just think about it, and I'll come back to you." And I went back. I'm like, I don't know what it is. He said, "If you want a guaranteed way to go bankrupt, stay away from tits and tires." He's like, "Because either one of them is never good, never good an outcome when you're out at 3 a.m. with one of them."
No, agreed. Yes. Very true story. Wise man.
Yeah,
Wise man. Yeah. So all of you youngsters watching, pay attention. Start taking notes.
that's it. The
Yes.
2 T's.
The 2 T's.
Put that in your liner notes, pal.
Oh goodness. I can't believe nearly an hour has gone by. This has been a whole lot of fun. But before I know we've got a hard stop at just prior to 90 minutes, but let's fast forward way forward.
Okay.
I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the comeback coach. I want you to be able to talk about vertical momentum and some of the other things that you're involved in. And I've got to say thank you because you've been an instrumental part of the Knock and Talk show coming to life and becoming better in episode 6 than it was in episode 1, and helping me a little bit behind the scenes and allowing me to come on your show, which I can't wait to listen to. But tell us this part of the comeback coach. What's involved in that?
All right. So what happened was, now, when I got hurt, I lost my vision in my left eye because after I got they ran over my head. I had an ocular stroke, which made me blind in my left eye. So they put me in a warrior transition unit, what they call it now, I guess. And it means I still had to go to drill, but we would just sit in a drill hall. I had to go there every Saturday, whatever dry drill weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And, I would sit there with the other people and, play checkers and chess, whatever. But then I started picking up books. And, one of the first books was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Mr. Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes. I'm a student of Mr. Kiyosaki.
Interviewing his partner, Sharon Lecter, next week.
Wow.
But what happened was I started reading all these books, and then I picked up a book because I just started getting into, is when the flip phones started changing into, you're able to watch videos on your phones.
Okay.
And I kept hearing this guy's name. Gary Vaynerchuk. And so I got everything I can read on him. I started watching everything he did. Now, my wife, sometimes says that my balls are bigger than my brains. So I found out that his father, Gary's father, owns a liquor store like 20 minutes from my house. So I called his father up and I'm like, hey, I want to come down and buy some liquor, but I only want to buy it from your son. When is he going to be there? Now, I don't drink. I haven't drank since 1988 or 89. But he said, Gary's going to be here on whatever date it was. So when he went down, I actually went down there and I did buy wine for my friends and family. And, but I actually got an audience with Gary Vee for like 20 or 30 minutes.
Cool.
And, and as we're talking, I gave him, actually has my Wounded Warrior hat hanging up in his office. Sometimes you can see it on his videos. But I said, Gary, I said, you're not, I don't know what to do. How do I start a podcast? What do I start about? And he said, well, tell me a little bit about your backstory. And he's like, well, you help people come back from life's difficulties. I'm like, yeah. He's like, and you've coached people before. You've helped guys with all these other places. He's like, so you're the comeback coach. And it was like, ding.
That's
and
awesome.
Then before he left, I said, Gary, I said, I'm not leaving here until you give me a golden nugget. I said, I know you normally charge these people, but I'm not leaving here without something. He said, you know what? He's like, a lot of people are spending millions of dollars on marketing themselves. He said, I want you to, when you go back home, I want you, everything you do, I want you to hashtag the comeback coach. So from now on, anybody wants to find out anything you're doing, all they got to go to their toolbar, hashtag the comeback coach, and it'll come up on everything that you're doing. And it's free marketing. And that's how the whole hashtag the comeback coach started. And that's when I started the podcast, and that's when I wrote the book. And now it's just, it's just growing. Thank God, big things are happening. I have, like I said, Mr. John Lee Dumas coming on. He gets 1 million downloads a month. His company his podcast is making over 150 grand a month.
Wow.
And he's given me 15 minutes to be able to come on. Now I do have a little bit of an in with him because he is a retired tank commander.
Okay.
So the reason why a lot of people that I have come on that are successful, either they have ties to the military, somebody was in the military, or a first responder. So it's always comes back to one way or another, helping out either an entrepreneur or a veteranpreneur or a first responder. So it's always the same, it's different guests, but it all pretty much comes down to helping the veteran or the first responder. It's always about paying it forward. Now I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh boy.
I'm not a big self-promoter. I don't like talking about this. Sometimes people ask me and I'm like, I even forget I got a book out there. I don't even remember it sometimes. But what was your experience being on the Vertical Momentum show?
It was it was my first time being interviewed for a podcast. I had right after 9/11, there was a local news outlet that there was an investigative reporter that was friends with that sergeant that I mentioned earlier, and I was still in the inactive reserves, and there was rumors floating around that they may start calling people back, and my sergeant asked me if I wanted to go on the news and be interviewed by I think it was Fox 5 or Channel 11. Anyway, I said sure, why not? So I got like 2.5 minutes on local TV, and that was neat. But that was almost 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. So that was the first time I was interviewed, and then fast forward to being on your show, that was the next time that I was interviewed, unless you talk all those years in court, and that's different. But it was interesting. You asked some great questions that were I had to dig deep and search for the answer. They weren't cookie cutter questions. They weren't specific to just my podcast or my career. You did a little research, dug into some of my social media stuff,
Yep.
and asked some pretty good questions. That I was like, wow, I hadn't thought about that in a while. So it was interesting. So if anybody has the opportunity to go on Vertical Momentum and get interviewed by the Comeback Coach, I highly recommend it because you'll learn something about yourself. I did.
For me, a lot of times you'll hear a host and they're always talking. And as my wife said, she tells me, because she listens to every episode with me because we're in the same house and she's working from home. And, I listened to some of my first episodes and I just talk over people. And she's like, just shut up, ask a question and just shut up and wait till they're done. So, I think that's one thing. And, like our branding is, whoever guest come on, they're the star of the show. It's not about me. It's
Right.
about their story and getting to people to get to know them. That's why I said, when I interviewed you, that I want to get to know the man behind the uniform. I don't want to ask the questions that everybody asks.
Right.
Like, for instance, I interviewed a guy and his name is Stephen D. Sims. Now, he's an 8-figure earner. I mean, he's a guy that he hangs out with the Trumps, he hangs out with the billionaires. So I dug deep into I listed almost 100 hours of episodes. And then I got his book, and of course I read it. So I asked him questions that he was never asked before. Like everybody asked him, well, what was it like working with Andrea Bocelli or Elton John? And I told Steve when he came on the show, I'm like, listen, and this was live because I don't edit anything. I said, I'm not going to ask you about Elton John because I really don't care. He's like, what? And I'm like, but I want to know, what was it like being that 16-year-old kid laying brick, trying to provide for you and your soon-to-be wife, which you're still married to today? And he's like, holy shit, you really went back. I was like, yeah, because I want you to, eventually share the episode, but I want you to be emotionally connected. And he said, all right, when they first started out, he's like, I only have 30 minutes. I was like, okay. So we get to 30 minutes. I'm like, all right, Steve, I know you got to go. He's like, no, let's hang out for another 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, sweet.
Having fun. So, I think that's what makes me a little bit different, Dad. I'm like Gary, there's no editing. It's 100% live. And whatever said gets said. So if you say something stupid, it's going to be there. And it's, for me, it's just having fun. And now it seems like I'm getting the opportunity to talk to, higher up people like Sharon Lecter and John Lee Dumas, General Petraeus. But then I also get to hang out with, great people like yourself that can give me feedback and find out what it's like for a police officer. Because sometimes, like I was talking to the Navy SEAL commander yesterday, he said a lot of times once you get higher up in the ranks, you forget where you came from.
Oh, I've seen that.
So now, like, I love talking to people. Like I got a guy interviewing it last week, and it'll come out in a couple of weeks. He's a recovering meth addict and heroin addict. But those are the kind of people that get me, like you and him, get me more excited than sometimes interviewing these great people, because you guys have amazing stories.
Yes.
And they're real. They're not BS. They're not, I'm just here to plug a book.
Right. Yeah. And that's the purpose behind this is, as you know, is to share those funny stories that sometimes we forget or we don't even think about because life is so dark. And this career field, military, law enforcement, first responder, is full of funny stuff that happens that, the stories need to be shared so that they're not forgotten. And interviewing frontline people where the stories are seen, experienced, raw, real, is awesome, and I love being in this space. Just 6 episodes in, getting an opportunity, however, to interview somebody like a General Petraeus or somebody up in the 8 figures. I mean, I don't even know what 8 figures looks like. I've got, I think, $17 in my pocket. So being able to talk to somebody like that and get perspective from up here would be cool too. Not taking anything away, because I'm sure they have their stories from before they were up here,
Yeah.
when they were down here with the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that was sort of eye-opening for me doing your show, was the research you put in beforehand to be able to ask the questions from before, not just what's relevant right now, not just my podcast or my guests, but what I was doing back then, way back here.
A lot of times, like the gentleman I'm interviewing, I say John's name, John Lee Dumas. He gets 1 million downloads a month. But what I want to talk about the first 5 minutes is how he was a tank commander in Iraq and lost 2 of his guys, and how he suffered with PSD for 6 years before he became the man that he is today. Because then there's an emotional connection.
Yeah.
There's people who can be like, because like the tagline of my show is, your past does not define your future. So a lot of people would be like, all right, he was a tank commander. He did suffer from PTSD. He was homeless at one point, but now he's making $150 a month, 150 grand a month. How did he do it, and why did he do it? It gives him a reason to want to listen, and it gives you hope. I'm going from a dope dealer to a hope dealer.
Right. There you go. There you go.
So that's my goal, is to, just to give somebody a little bit of hope. And, and now 350 episodes in, I'm still niching down even more on who my avatar is, which I never really figured out until I started interviewing these people that are very, very successful. They don't just pray and spray. They're more sniping. They know who their avatar is. They know who their listener is. And that was something that I struggled with, that now I'm finally starting to see some clarity with,
Yeah. You brought up Avatar. I had no idea that it was anything other than the groundbreaking movie from 10 years ago, I guess it was. Until getting into this and listening to people like you, and you brought up Rob Garcia, Dr. Rob, been instrumental in helping me get this started. So Rob, thank you. I didn't know what an avatar was, other than when you're playing video games and you want to look different than everybody else, you throw up an avatar. So that's what I thought an avatar was, and it wasn't until I started learning more about this that, wow, I need to figure out stuff. I need like an avatar. So
no, a lot of people say, "Oh, Avatar is a video game." But if you think of, when you think about it, when you're creating that avatar, they go down to the most minute detail.
Yeah.
What do the eyes look?
Right.
What does the nose look like? What kind of hat? Are you wearing glasses? What do you look like? So they go really, really deep. And I think a lot of times when you're starting a podcast, you are trying to go wide. Mm-hmm. But, like I was told by John today was, if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody.
Right.
And, I think, and now that's something that, I've had a wide net, and now it's starting to close up, because I'm starting to finally find, who my target audience is.
Yeah. And that's what helped me narrow mine down, was understanding what that avatar was, and getting into specifically the funny stories as the reason for the show, from a very niche community, law enforcement, first responder, military. That's not to say we can't discuss things like PTSD or TBIs or drug addiction, things like that, because I've got guests coming up that future guests.
Yeah.
In fact, you've already interviewed with them, I believe, the Noble Instinct group. So I've got guests coming up that have these stories to tell as well, that we can mix in funny stories.
Yeah.
But so I've got that avatar, but also have the ability, since it's my show, to do what I want and be able to open it up when needed.
Yeah. Like for me, I'm interviewing the guy. I don't know if you're a big football guy, but
college ball, not pro ball.
Well, there's the Los Angeles, whatever, Las Vegas Raiders. There's a guy out there that for the last 30 years he's dressed as Mr. Raider, and he dressed up with the face paint, and he's been on TV, he's been interviewed, and I'm like, you know what, I want him to have him on his show just so I could talk to him. So
right.
Great about it. That's one thing about having your own platform, is you can be like, all right, I told the guy, I'm not, I'm in recovery. I can't have any CBD products, but my audience probably uses CBD products. So I'm going to invite somebody on that's a professional in that to teach my audience what CBD is and how to actually use it.
Was that Sergeant G?
That's one of them. And then I had another gentleman that comes on. So, like I said, when you have your own platform, because whether you realize it or not, if you go past 13 episodes, you are in the top 10% of all podcasts in the world.
We're halfway there, baby.
Yep.
We're halfway there.
And the good thing is, like Rob, he's got a Shift magazine. Awesome. Been in there 3 times, I think. But once you have a platform, you are a media platform. So you can approach anybody. They may say no, but you can approach anybody, say, listen, I have a show, would you love to come on? And I love, talk to me about your new book that's coming out, because you always want to provide value.
Right.
You don't ever want to just have somebody come on your show just to ask some questions, because a lot of times they're going to say, like, if I went to you and I said, Pete, I got the number 8 veteran podcast in the world, why don't you come on? A lot of times somebody will look at it like, wow, what an asshole, but if I come on and say, Pete, I would love to have you come on. I know you're coming out with a brand new show. I would love to talk about it and promote it. You're more than likely to do it. Right?
Yes.
So the more value that you add, it's all about adding value to your guests and to your listeners. So that's what I try to do. I try to be different than everybody else. And if you listen to my show, you're going to hear all the screw ups, all the mistakes. Because when I was a kid, I loved watching bloopers. I always loved it. I always was by it. So, if somebody slips and says a curse word or whatever, it's going to be in there for life.
Yes.
So there's no editing. So you're going to hear all the ums, the ahs, and all that. So, I think that's what makes us a little bit different, that we're not all spit shine. We're just, I'm just a junkie that got lucky,
Well, that also affords the opportunity to have an outtakes dedicated episode where you can do the blooper show and the outtakes of people saying funny things and doing funny things.
See, I'm learning. I never thought about that. That's
there you go.
A good idea.
Yeah, there you go. Free from me to you.
Bitch, I gotta pay.
Well, what's next with Vertical Momentum?
Now we hired a team, so I actually have 5 different people, and they're all veterans. William Maitre is actually building our brand new website. It's going to be equal to Tony Robbins. It's going to be equal to Adam Carolla and Ed Milet. And then Kennedy Page, also another veteran, designing all of our logos.
Cool.
Patrick Burt is actually doing all of our SEO. So now we're all over Google. We're all over the first page of Google.
Nice.
Daniel Curry, Indy's IT department, is taking care of all of our making sure our computers are safe and secure. And Ginger and David making all of our T-shirts, hats, all of our swag. So we got a powerhouse team And I think, we've hit the top 100 podcasts on iTunes. I think we're going after, obviously Jocko is number one. He's the number one veteran podcast. So our goal is to hit the top 50 within the next year.
That's a good goal.
And be able to help more people. It's all about the creating value. And the more people that listen to it, the more people will share it, the more people can get help from it.
Right. Yes. And with that, this has been an awesome episode with the comeback coach, Richard Kaufman, and episode 6 of the Knock and Talk show. I appreciate you spending lunch hour with me today, and I know you've got to run to get to another show. Folks, go to Vertical Momentum, hit the hashtag comeback coach, learn more about Richard Kaufman, what he's got going on. He's a Army veteran that has picked himself up and come back on his own. I'm honored to have him on the show and to be able to call him friend. And brother, I look forward to having you back on the show in the very near future.
I love it. I just want to say thank you to your audience. And just remember that you do not have to be the same person tonight when you go to bed as the same person when you woke up this morning. And my tagline is, everybody loves a comeback story, and today it's your day.
Why didn't I come up with that? That's awesome. That's great. Well, folks, again, down here somewhere is the subscribe button. Please hit that. Like us on the face. Did you see it? Did you see it? It's there.
Yeah.
Okay. Find us on Facebook. We're starting with the IG, and Apple Tunes now has our first 4 or 5 episodes. So find us there. Thanks again for joining us.
And make sure you drink that energy drink. Make sure you try the watermelon. It's amazing.
The watermelon with Ray's Energy. There's our second plug. So folks, be safe. Take care. We'll catch you next time. Richard, hang on.